Welcome to the podcast. I'm Travis John from XDC Network. Today I'm sitting down with two remarkable women who run one of the most interesting real-world businesses I've come across in Central America. Frine Espinal, whose family founded this business, and Maria Bueso, who leads operations at the processing facility. We're going to talk to them about the company. We're going to talk about the region, the opportunity, and the work that they do every day. Toward the end, we'll touch on the PMX token, the utility token that runs this entire broader community and helps you listening and you watching participate at home. And it also helps connect you with the business in a complete and transparent way. Welcome, Frine. Thank you for being here. For those that don't know you, please introduce yourself and tell us where you're joining in from and how you're doing today.
Thank you, Travis. I'm Frine Espinal. I'm joining from El Salvador, and I'm part of the family behind the business. I also work as an administrative manager for Descalza, one of our sister companies, but also I've been involved in the operational side of the new project.
That's incredible. And I know we have Maria with us as well. You're joining us live at the commercial facility. Set the scene for us. Where are you exactly? What's going on today?
Hello, Travis. Hi, Frine. Thank you for having me. So, yes, I'm at the processing plant right now. That's why you might hear some noise in the background. I basically lead the daily operations here at the facility. Yes, today has been a really exciting day with a lot of processing and a lot of work.
Amazing. For the audience, I know that you usually have some of the background of the meat processing and things happening behind you, but I know you're in a different office today because there's other work going on there. But if we do have a chance toward the end, we will show that. If not, I'll add some of that footage here as part of our extra reel that we add of the actual facility you're at. So let's get into really how this all started. I think what's important is starting at the beginning. Frine, tell us about the company. How did your family really get into this protein business?
Well, the company started when my father, along with my mother, got into the meat industry around 13 years ago. And over time, they built a meat import and distribution company in El Salvador, mainly focused on beef, but we've also expanded into other protein categories. So what we basically did was work as a commercial platform connecting supply with that local market, especially in El Salvador.
What would you say the gap was that your family saw when they started this? Like what was missing in the region?
Early on, we realized demand was strong, but supply wasn't always consistent. There are producers in the region, but the system is a bit fragmented, so it's hard to have a reliable supply. For example, in our case, we sometimes have to wait 2 to 3 weeks for a container to arrive. And during that time, we didn't always have the specific products that our customers needed. That created frustration because they rely on us and we couldn't always respond as quickly as the market required.
Where I'm curious is you saw that there was a gap that your family kind of stepped in the region with producers and it was fragmented. There wasn't a commercial facility that was able to take on this demand and make this real, and again, this tying into real world assets and a real business. But ultimately, Central America and the region you're in is there's not a shortage of farmers or farm animals, right? It's just the commercial facilities to process the meat and create the protein and get it into the broader market or import export and regionally. There wasn't anyone to do that. So you stepped in. But how would you say the business evolved, how it operates today?
I think we saw that the infrastructure was missing. There is production in the region, but there hasn't been enough investment in modern processing infrastructure. So even if cattle is available, there is not efficient ways to process it and bring it to larger markets. So that's exactly the gap we're trying to solve. We're building infrastructure that makes the whole system more efficient and allow us to reach better markets. So the location also helps in Honduras connect supply more easily across the region and export globally. So it has evolved into a processing facility as we started to grow. But at some point, we reached a limit. We couldn't keep growing. Since most of our supply comes from Nicaragua, we face different challenges. like social political conditions, competition, and limited suppliers, as I mentioned before, which made growth unstable. So sometimes we even have to buy from local competitors just to meet demand, and that reduce our margins. So we realized we couldn't keep depending on others if we wanted to keep growing. That's when my dad took that risky move and decided to take the next step and build our own processing facility.
Wow. Yeah, that's an entrepreneurial story like so many of them, just finding it, seeing a real problem and affecting you personally, and then making the solution real and doing something about it. So that's incredible. I think, Maria, it'd be interesting to hear your take. I mean, how long have you been in the operations role at the facility, and how have you seen things change since you've been there?
So we've been part of this initiative from Frine's family since conceiving the project, designing the plant, choosing the the land where the plant was going to be built, the facility, and basically we've been working together for a while now, about 5 years, and it's been amazing to see the evolution from going from paper, from Excel sheets, from presentations, from putting everything together on the computer, all the way to having it now in real life. It's amazing, and having all the processing lines working and everything basically has come together as smoothly as someone can wish when there's this type of big projects.
Thank you. I think, Frine, going back to you, I know you've mentioned your father a few times. So he started the business. Your mother and father saw this opportunity. I know that he's not English speaking. That's why you're here talking on this podcast, or else he would be here as well. We're doing for those listening that are bilingual, we're doing a Spanish version as well. So that's also going to be available. But Frine, like, what would your father say? I know that you speak to him every day. So what would you say he would say currently, how the business is going, and his outlook currently on this?
For him, it's very special to see how the business has grown. What started as a commercial operation, it's now becoming something much bigger. It's been a long process with a lot of challenges along the way, who says evolving into something more structured and scalable. It's very meaningful for him and well for the whole family. He's very proud of what we're building, especially because it's something that can have a real impact beyond just the business itself. And he now can see how his dream has been materialized.
One of the things that really struck me when I first learned about protein markets is the regional story. Central America has no shortage, and I brought this up a little bit, but I want to just talk about this deeper, is there's just no shortage of farmland and necessarily cattle producers, but there is a shortage of modern commercial processing facilities. So I made this comment earlier, but I didn't ask you a question about it. I would like for you to talk about that and share with the listeners a little bit more about what this really means for the region.
I think this is a very important question because the modern facility has changed a lot in the region, which Honduras or Central America has already production. There are farms and cattle. So before, producers will either sell locally at lower prices or export raw without really capturing the value of the product. What this facility does is change that. It creates a more efficient and structured way to process and connect supply to bigger markets. And because of where it's located, helps connect different countries in the region more easily. So overall, it makes the whole system work better.
And it's a huge market, as you know. I've read that the overall protein market is like a $1.3 trillion industry. And, that's not counting many other factors that you're solving as it relates to meat production and commercial facilities, particularly in your region. But what does a modern processing facility actually mean for the region? Why is it such a big deal that one exists now when it didn't before?
Provide better pricing and capture the real value of the whole process itself. Now, producers will be able to have better structure and also to sell at a fair price with a better process overall.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen a lot of the headlines about imports, exports, and tariffs and how things change. And I think having a modern facility, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's not really it's not really an exception now, it's a rule. You really need a modern processing facility to keep up with the competitive pricing and to be more efficient and to be able to reach other markets. So yeah, it's really exciting that you can expand and that you were able to modernize the entire operation. Maria, I know that you haven't been able to speak for a moment, so going back to you. Let's go inside the facility for a second. I know you spend all your time working at the facility. Give us a visual here. What's it like inside the plant? What happens on a typical day?
Okay, perfect. So on a typical day, it's a very high energy consuming process. It starts with us receiving the cattle a day before, typically, and then this cattle goes through various specialized processing stages. We have dedicated teams managing everything from the initial process all the way to the final packaging. We handle a significant volume basically to meet both domestic and export demands. And all of this requires constant coordination to keep the lines moving efficiently. If basically the teams working together, always taking care of what is important. Number one is before anything is the food safety. We basically want to produce responsible meat that goes into the market and becomes nutrition for all of the consumers. So we cover from the animal all the way to packaging that meat and getting that to our consumers. Obviously, productivity is very important to us, but without food safety, we don't have productivity. So it's really important for us to meet all of the different requirements for us to produce this type of protein.
And you mentioned processing meat and what it means to get the protein. And I know some people kind of call it like nose to tail. So outside of just meat processing, I understand there's tallow, there's bone meal, a whole range of products. Can you share more about that?
Yes, that's right. So while high quality protein is our primary business, we are built to be zero waste, close loop facility. This means that we use the entire animal. We receive the live animal, but the meat is only part of that live animal. So we have to do further processing. So our facility is actually called a park and an industrial park. It is made up of three different processing plants. Our main processing plant is where we produce the meat, where I was telling you about from the live animal all the way to having it packaged. And then we have a secondary plant where we process all the byproducts. Those byproducts um, basically become blood meal, bone meal, or meat meal. Those are basically made out of what what we don't produce for human consumption. So all of this goes basically to the animal pet food industry where they use our meals to produce feed. Also, from that rendering plant, we call it the rendering plant, we extract the tallow, which is also part of those meals that are being used for pet food industry. The third plant is our industrial water processing plant. So we can't contaminate the rivers or the waters here. So we have a really modern, well, all of our plants are really modern, but our water processing plant is, I think it's the first one in the region where it, it's all automated. So we receive the water and it's processed, and in a couple of hours, that water can return to the rivers without any contamination. From that plant, we also produce other byproducts, which are part of the live animal. For example, the inside the rumen, we took it to the processing plant and we can put it into a type of fertilizer. So basically, nothing goes to waste here. We are a closed loop facility.
I love that. Both sustainability and zero waste, that's absolutely the top tier standard for running a business. Just sticking with you for a moment, Maria, because I would like to know about this. As you're talking about the facility, what international standards or what kind of standards is the facility built to? I mean, you pretty much gave us a visual of just how modern and how well built everything is, how state of the art. But I'd love to hear about that, and also if you serve export markets as well. Are you just domestic, or do you also serve export?
Well, the most important, as I mentioned before, the most important international and local also standard is the food safety standard, which just guarantees that product that's going to be fed to for human consumption is basically safe. It's not going to cause any sickness to someone. So that's the most rigorous standards we meet. It's called the HACCP. And yes, we serve both markets. And with it being in compliance with HACCP, we are able to serve both markets. The facility was built to comply with international standards, with which HACCP is one of the most important ones. We have high levels of quality also, and food safety standards for exports. And also, this operation is a major driver. That's really important for the local economy. I know we've mentioned this before, but I really like to second that that talking point that we provide a lot of steady jobs in the region. Not only here in the plants, but it's a it's an effect that goes both ways, from all the way to the cattle production and all the way to the consumption of this protein. So came here to modernize the whole agricultural landscape in the region, basically.
That's incredible. The two of you just told a really remarkable story of how you've really solved a real need in the current market, and the need there and regionally for a commercial facility to process meat, and the whole tip to tail, as well as a sustainable zero waste facility. I think the next thing that we should probably talk about is just what does this mean for an opportunity? I know we're talking about how the PMX token is aligned here and also how protein markets aligned. So I think we'd like to jump back to you probably, Frine, if we could, and let's just zoom out for a moment because I'd really like to talk a little bit about the opportunity here that exists and kind of why this all came together as it relates to a blockchain based solution. So if we zoom out, you mentioned a little bit about how big the market is before, but the global market's over $1.3 trillion dollars, and the demand for animal protein is projected to grow meaningfully over the next several years. I know that's stating a very obvious thing there, but where does protein markets fit into this picture?
We see ourselves as part of a bigger opportunity. Demand for protein keeps growing in the region. In our case, in our region, the supply chain is still not very efficient. So our role is to build a platform that connects supply with both regional and international markets. Even though the processing facilities in Honduras, the structure is designed to support markets like El Salvador and expand into other countries in the region and beyond. So we're not thinking only locally, we're thinking about how to scale this.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but the business, as you mentioned, it's not just beef, and you're already thinking about some other verticals, poultry, eggs, other proteins that could be part of your growth plan. Is that accurate?
Yeah, actually, we consider that growth comes from expanding capacity, increasing export penetration, and integrating additional protein lines. So we're thinking in including other protein categories. This is not a static operation; it's a scalable platform, so it can become a more diversified business in the future years.
What Frine mentioned is really important, and what has us working really hard here every day, because growth here is very tangible for us. The land we have available for growth is big enough, and the space we have, and also, which is really important that we haven't mentioned that much, is the capacity of having enough people to work with us. The people is a very important pillar of our whole processing facility. So we're actually right now working toward a 50% increase in capacity to meet our rising demand. And operationally, that means more people and also more processing lines. But as these processing lines are really modern, it involves basically designing them to achieve those further export certifications and markets. We want to maintain the market we already have. We want to grow new markets. And that basically helps us stay at the top of our field as we go scaling up.
I love that. What you just described really is the next segment we're getting into is just kind of why blockchain, why PMX token, why you would do this. But you just described that in your own words of why people use the blockchain. People use the blockchain to expand their business opportunities, to democratize access to their business. And we just got both of you just said all of those things in different ways, just in how you're running your business and how you're scaling it. So, I mean, we've gotten to the point where we've kind of told that story. You have a real operating business. We can tell you have real customers, you have real revenue. You're obviously have a platform that's scalable, like you mentioned. But what does the PMX token have to do with all this? Protein markets, it's a real business, but you decided to make the foray into blockchain. Like I mentioned, it seems very obvious based on what you've already described. But you have a PMX utility token now that's on the XDC network that's going to be live soon, that gives a global community a transparent, democratized access way to engage with your ecosystem and really kind of follow along the business and align with your success. So I know that the mechanism is pretty straightforward, but a portion of the facility's gross revenue is allocated each month to buy the PMX token on the open market. Do I understand that correctly? Is that the plan?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. And with every purchase, every burn, that's all posted on the blockchain, on the XDC blockchain, I understand. And anyone can verify the activity, can confirm too, the supply is at 100 million. And the burns are going to reduce that supply over time, of course, as the facility operates. I wanted just to turn back to you, Frine, real quick and get back to the personal side of your family's perspective. Why did you decide to go in this direction? I know you told me a little bit about this beginning, but I think there were some other things that I thought was important to ask you about.
Well, certainly it is. For us, it's about opening the project to more people. It also gives us another way to grow without depending only on traditional financing. From our perspective, tokenization is simply a bridge. It connects global participants to a real world operating business, and it allows access and transparency in something that traditionally has been very close and in some cases even unknown.
Exactly. And I think one of the things that I've found that's really gaining traction with businesses expanding to the blockchain and using digital assets as the currency is a couple of the more successful projects recently have a very similar tokenomics design that you've decided to use at Protein Markets. Many of the listeners are probably familiar with Hyperliquid or Canton, where their protocol activity drives the supply reduction. And I think that's really starting to become the winning strategy for how you can connect real businesses and opportunity and real revenue with a utility token that represents a real world asset industry and vertical. So I think one of the things that I personally find compelling is the blockchain, specifically in this case with XDC Network. It's built for real use cases. So this fits perfectly with what you're doing with Protein Markets and the PMX token because it lets you publish revenue reports and your mint and burn receipts that everyone can audit, right? One of the main things that we see with blockchain is it's a simplified version of explaining it is just a ledger to keep track of all of these things. And this is a perfect way to do that for Protein Markets. On the note of transparency though, Frine, I'd love to hear how you feel about transparency and like how you feel about this type of mechanism, how the blockchain is able to provide all of this transparency into all of your reporting and all of your revenue numbers that you post.
Transparency is very important for us as a family business. We've always worked based on trust and long-term relationships. So being able to show real numbers and real performance and have that visible is something that fits very well with how we operate.
Amazing. For anyone that wants to go deeper on the mechanics, I do encourage you to review the full white paper, the tokenomics, contract address, everything. All of that will be here in the show notes as we're closing out. I do have a couple of quick questions, though. Moving over to you, Maria. When someone outside the region watches this and they see what you do every day at the plant, what do you want them to take away from this?
Okay, so I want them to see that this is a real modern operation. It's not just a concept. It's a facility where people are working hard to provide essential protein products for the community and for everyone while supporting the local community. I want them to feel the authenticity and that we keep standards, we uphold them every day to make the business basically a success.
Frine, same question to you. I mean, I'd love to hear this in the same capacity, but really from your side and your family business side, when someone joins the PMX community, what are they really becoming a part of?
I think they're becoming part of something real. This is not just an idea. This is a business that it's already operating and growing and solving a real problem in a region, as I mentioned before, and also part of a long-term vision to improve how protein supply works. What makes this different is that everything is based on a real business, real production, real customers, real revenue. The blockchain just makes that visible, and we're also exploring how blockchain can help on the payment side by potentially accepting crypto and stablecoins for cross-border transactions. I have to mention that El Salvador has already taken important steps in this space and has positioned itself as a leader in digital payment and Bitcoin adoption. Crypto has become a form of currency, so we are upgrading and enabling new ways of payment. What we're doing is not just building a facility. What we're doing is building a platform.
Well, I really loved all the conversation and the back and forth and really learning more about the facility, why you started it, where you're going from here, and really all the passion that's behind what you're building at Protein Markets and what this means for making your foray into the blockchain world and digital assets. I'd say LATAM is probably the strongest area for using stablecoins for commerce and for import-export payments. So I'm glad to hear that you're considering that and you're moving into that direction. It's on your roadmap. As I mentioned just a moment ago, the full white paper, the tokenomics, all the transparency reports and everything is here in the show notes. So please take a look at that. The pre-sale is active currently at the time of this recording. And I wanted to thank you both today for your time. This has been an absolute pleasure. We'll do this again as we get closer to the full launch. I'd like to kind of check in and have a little bit different conversation. And again, we have a Spanish version of this podcast coming out soon as well. Thank you again for joining. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.